Let's look to the Middle East. They're brutally abused, sometimes even killed, for the sake of what's called family honor. Who are these people? They're women, and they're usually found in Muslim families.
Now, a new film is raising awareness about the horrors these women suffer and what can be done to help them. Chris Mitchell brings us this story from Jerusalem.
Honor Diaries, a new documentary, chronicles the systematic abuse and subjugation of hundreds of millions of women in Islamic and other honor-based societies around the world.
The honor system that exists in many cultural societies is really the basis of a lot of harm that is perpetuated against women.
Tweeting, Facebooking, those things can be deemed dishonorable.
Anything from wearing short sleeves, refusing to wear a headscarf, being seen talking to a man, and in some of the most horrifying cases, having been sexually assaulted.
The film brings together 9 women's rights activists and experts, most of them devout Muslims, to tell their stories and stories of the women they work with.
There's a terrible fear of the educated, empowered woman.
They talk about public lashing because of immodest dress, acid attacks, mutilation, forced marriages of little girls as young as 8 or 5 years old, widespread female genital mutilation, and even murder by family members, all carried out under the guise of preserving family honor.
Honor Diaries is not only a movie documentary, it is the initiation of a movement.
At the film's Jerusalem premiere, CBN News spoke with one of the film's experts, Dr. Kanta Ahmed.
Honor violence affects women of all backgrounds, women of all faiths. In many societies, unfortunately, some of the most egregious manifestations are in the Muslim majority world, and these are women who can't speak for themselves.
It's a phenomenon that's spreading even in the U.S. But the movie is facing opposition in America. Several college campuses, including the University of Michigan, have canceled the film. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, is spearheading the campaign against the movie. This is what one CAIR representative said on Fox News.
We don't have a problem with the content of the film. I understand that there are women who participate in this film who are Muslim women who work on these very serious issues. What I'm personally disgusted by as a Muslim woman, as a feminist, is that someone like the Clarion Project would take this film and use it to promote their own hate-filled agenda.
The Clarion Project produced the movie, but author Robert Spencer says anyone who speaks honestly about Islam is considered an Islamophobe.
Muslims commit 91% of honor killings worldwide, and there is no penalty in Islamic law for a parent who kills a child. And so anybody who speaks honestly about this kind of thing is targeted by Islamic supremacist groups in the U.S., demonized, vilified, marginalized, accused of hatred, bigotry, and so on.
One of the film's producers, Paula Kweskin, says people need to wake up and realize they can make a difference.
There's this paralyzing political correctness that makes us think that we can't challenge things if we don't know about it, but human rights are never something to be ignored. They're never something to be excused by culture or religion.
The controversy may actually draw more people to see Honor Diaries and focus attention on what many Muslim women say is an enormous human rights tragedy that needs to be exposed. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. I salute Megyn Kelly, by the way, of Fox News. She is an accomplished attorney and a very beautiful lady, and she put this thing on, and CAIR, that Council of American Islamic Relations, you know, is the front for all the extremism that they do. That front group came after her, and she said, I'm not going to apologize. It's a true story. I put it on, and, you know, good for her. Well, once again, Islamic terrorists are suspected in deadly attacks in Nigeria. John Jessup has that story from Washington. Here's John.
Pat, 20 people are dead after the suspected terrorist struck for the 4th time in 3 days. The latest attack took place in northeastern Nigeria following Monday's explosion in the capital. That blast killed 75. And close to 130 teenage girls taking final exams were kidnapped from a school in the northeast. All but 8 later escaped or were set free. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation says the abduction, quote, tarnishes the good name of Islam. And UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says the targeting of schools and school children is a grave violation of international humanitarian law. Search and rescue teams are still looking underwater for survivors from that sunken ferry off of South Korea. At least 9 people are confirmed dead, with about 300 still missing. And as Heather Sells reports, mostly on board were high school students returning from a school trip.
Parents anxiously wait as search and rescue teams continue to comb the waters off South Korea. But strong currents, rain, and bad visibility are making it hard for rescuers to search the vessel and nearby waters. Parents are clinging to hope with text messages like this from one missing 18-year-old. "Dad, don't worry. I've got a life vest on and we're huddled together." Another son simply texted, "Mom, I might not be able to tell you in person. I love you." This family received the devastating news their son did not survive. The ferry was carrying 475 people, most of them high school students, on a school trip to the tourist island of Jeju. But after traveling overnight and with just 3 hours left to go, the ship began to list. One crew member now says an immediate evacuation order was not issued, and that could have cost lives. Instead, the ship's officers spent a precious half hour trying to stabilize the ferry before telling the passengers to get off. The captain of the ship, seen here hiding his face in his sweater, has apologized.
I am really sorry and deeply ashamed. I don't know what to say.
First responders were able to reach the ship using helicopters. Rescuers lifted some passengers from the deck, while others clutched onto railings until they could make it onto rescue boats. It was very intense, says this man. The ship tilted more than 45 degrees. The ferry sank in the 90-foot seas in just 2 hours. So far, no word on what caused the tragedy. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Pat, what a heartbreaking tragedy.
Well, you can imagine those parents. You just, I'm a parent and a grandparent, and you just love those children, and they love their children, and to see something like this happen. But, we've got to remember that there's human compassion all over the world. In every society, there's a love of parents for their children, and I think we have to remember that. And I want to go back to the stories we did just prior to that, though. We were talking about that Boko Haram in Nigeria, what they're doing. And we see these examples of Muslim terrorism. And people say it's a distortion of a great religion. It isn't a distortion of this religion. It is the heart of this religion. This religion is based on warfare, on revolution, on suppression of women. It's all in there. It's in there in black and white. I mean, on, chapter and verse, in the Quran and in the Hadith and in various teachings and various actions of the leadership of that organization. And the people who are doing these honor killings, they're following the tenets of that faith. Now, we have a booklet that's been prepared by a group called Truth. People who speak Arabic, are versed in the Quran, experts in this, and it's called Islam, a religion of peace or war. And I think when we're facing the trouble we're facing in the world and the struggle that goes on in the world, you need to have the facts. And you don't need a great big book, and you don't need to have to speak ancient Arabic in order to understand it. It's all there in black and white, and including doctrines that indicate that the early teachings of Muhammad are no longer in effect because of another doctrine they've come up with to say, well, now he changed his mind. It's all in here. Islam, religion of peace or war. You can get it, and maybe some of you want to get these in quantities for your churches or groups. You could ask for more copies. I think there's a slight charge if you want additional copies. We'll give you these things for free, but you can call in. We've had, my goodness, lots of them, 40.
It's very eye-opening. I finished reading it this morning, and you can read it in about an hour or less. And just the detail it goes into about Muhammad will shock you, Pat, and the verses that, we see these things and we can't understand how could they run a plane into the Twin Towers, or how can they behead somebody? How can the Abu Sayyaf behead people? It's right there in the Quran, black and white. It says, behead the unbeliever. So they can do it with a clear conscience. Right. And when we understand what the Quran really says, then we get it.
And for the President of the United States to stand before the United Nations said that those who defame or slanders, actually slander the Prophet of Islam, don't have any future or don't have the future. Well, slander is something that they don't like, and well, that's the way it goes. But slander or otherwise, this is truth, and truth is important. So you got the number on your screen, so write in, or call in, and somebody will send one of these things to you. Well, we're going to continue. This is a shock. You know, I remember when Mitterrand was head of France, some of the delegation came and I had lunch with some of them. We were talking about communism and what they believed and so forth. Mitterrand he said he was a socialist or a communist. Well, the socialist prime minister of France has come out with something that you find very interesting, and here's John to tell us about it.
That's right, Pat. The socialist prime minister of France plans to cut spending from his country's welfare programs. France has some of the highest domestic spending in the world, but Prime Minister Manuel Valls told the cabinet, quote, "We cannot live beyond our means." The tax cuts amount to about 4% of total spending. That would be the biggest reduction in France in half a century. France's socialist government is also taking another conservative step to boost the country's weak economy: tax cuts. British Prime Minister David Cameron is speaking out about the importance of Christianity in his country. Writing for the Anglican newspaper Church Times, Cameron says, "I believe we should be more confident about our status as a Christian country, more ambitious about expanding the role of faith-based organizations, and frankly, more evangelical about a faith that compels us to get out there and make a difference to people's lives." Cameron also says he knows how powerful faith can be in the toughest of times, and that some issues such as welfare can be controversial, but he says he sees churches as vital partners. You can find a link to his column at cbnnews.com. And Pat, here's a stat for you. Some 60% of Brits say they've never attended a religious service.
Well, it's what you happen when you have a state church. It gets to be dead. You know, you endow a church and you're asking for trouble. We have a much more vibrant society here because we don't have an established church. So our priests are not members of the House of Lords, or our bishops aren't members of the House of Lords, etc. But for David Cameron, I am so grateful for that. And, you know, the heritage we have in America, a lot of it comes out of British law. We speak the English language and so forth. And so we have close ties to Great Britain and to England. And I am just very happy to see a courageous leader like Cameron. And of course, Margaret Thatcher was probably the most admired leader outside of our own president in the world when she was in office.
The wildfires that devastated poor neighborhoods in Valparaiso, Chile are now under control. 15 people died and more than 11,000 lost their homes. Volunteers joined homeless residents to clean up the neighborhoods where flames consumed more than 3,000 homes. Firefighters say it may take 3 weeks to extinguish the embers, which the wind could spread to other neighborhoods. At least 3 churches were destroyed in the fire. Christians have joined forces to provide meals and supplies to those who lost their homes. Churches from around the country are collecting blankets and other supplies for the thousands of families left homeless by the Valparaiso fire. The U.S. Postal Service is looking to get into the business of gathering and selling personal information, like internet companies Facebook and Google. The Daily Caller reports that a Postal Service executive recently spoke out about the possibility, saying the post office can pick up information about customer behavior gathered by monitoring. For instance, what businesses people get mail from, and then selling that information to advertisers and retailers, and they can then use traditional mail to target customers. You can find out more about this story and always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, cbnnews.com.